Assalamu alaikum. Greetings, 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 dear brothers and sisters. My name is Dr. Gloria Bashir, and on behalf of Masjid Al-Taqwa, the resident Imam, pardon me, Tariq El-Amin, and the TaLeem committee uh, that is chaired by Dr. Aisha El-Amin, and that committee includes myself, Dr. Lionel Allen, and my dear sister today, who is presenting, Sister Rasheedah Fitzpatrick. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So on behalf of the TaLeem committee, I greet you with the greetings of peace. And I'd like to first open our TaLeem with Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina sirata mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim, ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Ameen. And I will repeat this in English. With Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. All praise be to God, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds, the merciful benefactor and merciful redeemer, master of the day of judgment. Thee do we worship, and thine aid we seek. Show us the straight way, the way of those on whom thou hast bestowed thy grace, and those whose portion is not wrath, and who go not astray. Amen. So we have a wonderful, wonderful part 2 presentation by our dear sister, my TaLeem colleague, Sister Rasheedah Fitzpatrick. So I'm going to first give you a little bit of her bio, and she was quite modest in her bio. And so Sister Rasheedah is a 3rd-generation educator and the daughter of Imam Ajin Muhammad, and her mom, Sister June Muhammad, was a teacher herself at Sister Claire Muhammad School. She is a 20-year high school special education biology teacher, and she holds a master's degree in leadership and education. And she is also a health enthusiast. She is also a mom of, she has some beautiful, beautiful children, including a set of twins. She is also just a wonderful light in our community, and we're so pleased to have her today. So welcome, 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 my dear colleague. So we're going to let you start your presentation, and which is a part 2 on her presentation last week, talking about unearthing joy. And so I will turn it over to you, my dear sister.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so very much for those kind words. It's been my pleasure to work alongside you. I just wanted to kind of elaborate a little bit more on the author, Gholdy Muhammad, and also kind of give my my experience in education on a lot of the things that she brought up in her book, Unearthing Joy, which is available through Scholastics. It has a lot of good information, and it's wonderful, a wonderful asset to have. My school is planning on using it for school improvement for equity, and that was kind of like my introduction to finding out more about Gholdy Muhammad. So the first clip that I wanted to just talk about is just how Gholdy became so passionate in her field, and how her relationship with Allah has really been, and her relationship with this is being a Muslim, it's really been her motivation. So without any further ado, let me find my clip.
And while you're doing that, Sister Rasheedah, let me just add for the audience that for those who might have missed last week's presentation, this is all about unearthing the joy of teaching, of education. And it was a wonderful talk. We had wonderful Sister Rasheedah had a couple of wonderful guests who were able to expound on their experiences as educators. And so we're continuing today because we had talked last week about when you're part two, that we would actually have possible, recommendations on how we can improve education and improve unearthing that joy. Okay, so proceed, please.
Yes, here we go. Can you all see this,
Books
Gholdy?
about religion. That was always,
No.
and this was very
Oh, you can't
fascinating
see
to
it?
me. It was always
No,
fascinating
not.
to me as a
Okay,
child.
one moment. Now I gotta figure out how to do this.
Just share content.
I thought I pushed that. One moment. Let me go back to the screen.
Mhm.
No, not that yet. Okay. Okay. Share.
There
Okay.
you go.
You know? Okay, very good. All right.
Beautiful.
Here she is. Okay, so here's the question.
Was
You just asked the
read a lot
question.
of Maya Angelou and Richard Wright and Black authors that I never got exposed to in schools. I would find out about them and read them outside of school. And I read a lot of nonfiction and a lot of autobiographies and memoirs about people's lives. So yeah, and of course I was one of those child that was really interested in religion and theology. So I would find myself reading like the Torah, the Bible, the Quran, and even like children's books about religion. That was always, and it still is very fascinating to me. It was always fascinating to me as a child.
Were you raised in the Islamic faith, or was that something that happened?
I was raised as Muslim, and my mother, like many Black people in the 1960s, was looking for direction and guidance, but was also looking for Black justice and to sort of hold on to faith. And like many Black people during this time, they started to listen to folks like Brother Malcolm X and Unearthing Muhammad and their guidance that brought them into Islam and to Black liberation as well at the same time. And that was her generation. So I was the next generation raised into that of Islam. So yeah, always been a part of my life and always has guided me really of understanding the importance of justice and anti-oppression, but also joy and humanity.
Interesting. All right. So you started at a school that was predominantly Black teachers, and then you transitioned into majority white school. So what did you see in regard to like the differences growing up from those two, school districts that you were in?
Well, in one school in Gary, the resources were limited, but the instruction was rich. And the going into other schools, they had more resources, but poor instruction. So it looked like it was in a more economically wealthier area in comparison when I left Gary, Indiana. It looked like they had more access to different community resources, but the curriculum was raggedy. It did not, you couldn't see yourself in it. You couldn't learn about your people. You didn't learn about Black history. And if you didn't learn about Black history, it was taught in very false and incomplete or deficit ways. In my first school, people said my full name. And in my second school, they didn't want to say my name. They wanted a nickname. So I felt like seen and heard. I didn't feel like I had to check who I am at the door in my first school. And I had to do that more. I didn't see myself as much in the curriculum, in the teachers, and the students. And so it was like this fight for self. And a lot of that, a lot of the times, or most of it, I did not get into college because I didn't get it in middle school and in high school. And in the middle of my experience, I also went to an Islamic school, and I got parts of my identity met and parts of myself being honored at that school, and some parts were not. So, it's been interesting going through different types of schooling experience to see what worked for me as a young Black girl and what simply didn't work. And I use all of those experiences to shape who I am as an educator today. And
Well, I wanted to her storyline is very similar to my own. I was able to I attended public school. I do remember the teacher saying my name correctly. I don't remember it being cut off or the masculine version of my name being used, because that happened a lot where it was Rashid and I had to correct them. And I was always like on guard, ready to say my name properly. But all praise to Allah, I was able to go to Sister Clara Muhammad for grades 4th through 10th. And much like Dr. Muhammad mentioned, a lot of my identity was shown to me there. I saw myself as a Muslim. I saw myself as I got to see all of these role models, the teachers being Muslims, and how beautifully they dressed, and they made being a Muslim look elegant and graceful and something to aspire to. So a lot of my I guess my inspiration or my sheroes were the teachers that I saw at Sister Claire Muhammad. So I guess it was easy for me to step into the role as a teacher because I identified so much with my mother, and I was blessed to be able to have my mother as my 8th grade teacher. So it was it's almost like throughout my teaching career, I find myself, because I sound like my mother. I have, I try to but I also try to remember the things that didn't work out so well for me in school, where I felt invisible. So I always try to see my students, and I always try to learn their names. And if I haven't learned their name, then I apologize. I let them know that it's not a slight on them. So that experience, along with just understanding the sort of the give and take of a teacher, how a teacher has to appear present, not as if she's just going through the motions. That does a lot for a child sitting in that seat, feeling like what they have to say matters, and also recognizing that they have something to contribute to the conversation. Early on in my career, it was a lot more dialogue with students than there. Since COVID has been a lot more cut off, and it's more like pulling teeth to get students to talk. But I definitely try to, when students do just say the slightest thing, recognize that they're speaking and make sure that they know that I see them in the classroom, because that identity piece is very important, and feeling like you're seen and not that you have to instantly make yourself invisible. That was a lot of my childhood experience in high school, was when after leaving Sister Claire Muhammad and going to a public school, that's when I had to correct people for my name, and I had to make sure, check myself and my thoughts and my ideas, because they weren't necessarily shared by the teachers in front of me, instructors in front of me, because once I went to public school, I didn't see too many African Americans. That's when it was like a shift, and it was almost like code switching. I had to know which environment I was in, and that quote unquote, me being a Muslim was not the most important thing, in the world, where it was at Claire Muhammad that was part of your identity. You're Muslim, and we see everything from the Muslim perspective. That had to be checked at the door when I started going to public schools. And much like Dr. Muhammad mentioned, I did not see myself in the classroom as far as in the textbooks. And I had to, my first university was UIC. I had to actually take classes on, I had to take Black history classes, or Black classes that centered around African Americans, in order to see myself in the curriculum. Because other than that, the regular classes that were required, I was required to take, the Black Studies classes were the only time I was able to see myself. And that's kind of like what, it was enough for me to be able to be in those Black Studies classes and then take the other classes I was required to take, because at least those classes filled me up and made me feel valued and important. And that's unfortunately the case for a lot of our children. Who still don't see themselves unless they get into a Black Studies class or they get into African American literature. And as far as I know, that those African American literature is only available at the senior level at my school, as well as my daughter's school at Homewood Flossmoor. So it's not something that you get right away access to. It's almost as if you have to earn your time to be able to see yourself, which should not be the case. I'm going to move on to another clip where she talks about what education is supposed to look like.
Thank you for those comments. Thank you.
We're going to talk about what education is.
That was always
Just put it up there. 15. Okay. If you could play at 15, I would do it. It's gonna, I don't know if it's gonna let me play it on this one. Let me see. Go back. Here we go. 28.
Beautiful thing. I know, like, with education, it's, you've mentioned that a lot of it is about skill development and testing and certain things that are outside of what is supposed to be done. So can you define for us what you think education actually is, and what does it mean for a Black child to be educated?
So education is a beautiful something. And I think traditionally we've thought of education as sort of as like a binary of a teacher and a student. And someone has the education and someone doesn't. But education is something we all sort of have if we're in the world. Like, we all carry genius, we all we have knowledge and understanding, gifts and brilliance in something. And throughout time, we're just nurturing and cultivating what's already there. And it's like this recursive process. We're teaching, we're learning, we're teaching ourselves, we're teaching others, we're learning. We are never just the student, and we're never just the teacher. A true and sort of authentic educational setting looks at the community as both teachers and learners, and not sort of in these hierarchies. So I think education is this process of gaining and adding to your life, advancing your life about the world around us. And it comes through all sorts of ways. It comes through travel. It comes through traditional classroom settings, hopefully. It comes through books. It happens in collaboration. It happens alone. And it's important that we understand that teaching and learning through education, right, happens in all these and it's manifested in all these ways. Because if we get stuck on this philosophy of, I have something and I'm just pouring into students, that's not what real education is. They're pouring into me too. If I leave unchanged, if I leave with the same amount of knowledge and information I had at the beginning of the year, I've done nothing as a teacher. I have not done my full work. But we'll be surprised. There are teachers from beginning to the end of the school year, they start and leave with the same amount of skills and knowledge they had. They don't really see students as sources of knowledge and information that can be taught to them. So education is a beautiful thing, and it connects the mind and the heart together too, because we have to be open to receive and to learn all the things throughout our lives.
Interesting. So I was reading one of your comments in one of your interviews, and somebody was like, education is becoming so political now, I mean, you're talking about identity, you're talking about racism, you're talking about justice and all these things. So what do you say to
Oops, I'm sorry.
those that are saying that, well, Dr. Muhammad is politicizing education and these kids should be learning, things that they need to learn for the future and for to get a job and this and that and the third. And why are we talking about racism, which is, subjective anyway, and da da da. Like, so what do you say to those people that
Well, I
have
would say education is not becoming politicized. Have we ever had education that was apolitical? That's what I would ask. I mean, if we're talking about the United States, and I'm assuming the people you're talking about is talking about this, because we have to always contextualize things. Context, time period, history matters. So if we're talking about the US, which I'm assuming we are, is that correct?
Yes, it was some comment on one of your interviews.
Related to the United States.
Yeah.
When has education have not been politicized? That would be my follow-up question. Because I'm not here to answer that question. I am here for you to tell me if you think that this is just starting or that it started with me. I'm too young for it to start with me, first of all. But if you think it started with me, then you don't have the education about education. That is the issue. I mean, I study history. My mother's a historian. I love history. I've always appreciated history. And if you study history, if we look at what it means to be politicized, what people are talking about with political, when they say education is political, they're meaning that there's power involved. People are saying that there's some power dynamics involved. Even a teacher standing in front of the class and say, you have to listen to me, that's political because there's power. Absolutely. Who says I have to listen to this person? It's almost just understood. They're an adult. I should listen, and they're standing in front of the class. That is power. Richard Wright says every piece of literature is political. What does he mean by that? Everything one has written has power? Yes, because in the United States, that was founded on colonization. I mean, we can be honest. Folks do not have to feel guilty for people in the past who have hurt and harmed another human. You don't have to feel bad for their actions. They did it. But you should say that it is wrong and say that we should not be doing these kinds of things to people. But if you study like education around, the first public school was around 1630s in the United States. That curriculum was politicized. It was pushing Christianity into the classroom. And so one could say, they're trying to push that ideology into children, if they were Christian or not. Then shortly after, you had the emergence of the indigenous boarding schools, you had enslavement, you had all these things that had power dynamics of making sure some people have justice and humanity and some people don't. And when society was built that way, the schools, the businesses, the churches, the institutions, everything became like a reflection of this society. So, of course, very naturally, you can assume that the same power dynamics and politicized structures we saw in society, we would see in schools, we would see in the textbooks.
Somebody was like,
I just appreciate her giving me that education on education. Because a lot of times, and my hope is that this message can get out to other teachers to understand that it is, you're not breaking any code by, steering away from the way that we were taught. If anything, if once you recognize that something is politicized, then you can actually use that information or that knowledge to empower your students by giving them opportunities to, stretch their imagination and understand, well, why do you think that happened? Or why do you think this particular author said it this way? And, or because I'm looking at my son and I'm extremely grateful to know that my son's English class is actually covering one of August Wilson's books, The Piano Lesson. It warms my heart to know that at least the school district what I'm paying into is actually recognizing our greats, one of our greats as far as in literature. So no, taking that initiative, I'm grateful that I'm in that kind of, my children are in that kind of learning environment, because only talking about literature from one perspective, like my experience was in school, I had to listen to, I can't even recall, I remember this, what was it called? Of Mice and Men, stories along those lines. Not that they're bad, they're not bad literature, but it's like include other literatures from other races, not just one race, because they're a great there, and there's power in that. There's power in introducing those characters and showing the layers of humanity that you live, that are existed, not just one version of it, not just one perspective of it. And because a lot of, I know the curriculum in my school, the history class has taken all the power out of the teacher's hands and made it where this is all you're going to teach. And I guess that's a mercy of Allah that I'm not a history teacher, because I really might be up in arms about it, because I would be fighting so hard. I know Allah is in control of everything. He had me in science.
Sister Rasheedah, may I ask you something?
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
listening to Dr. Muhammad, I mean, I am getting excited, and I'm not a teacher, but I'm getting very. I've worked a lot in education, but not as a teacher. But I'm getting very, very excited, because the language that you've used and that she's using, people don't often associate with education, but in fact, it's very much a part of education. And the fact that she's saying, and we all are fully hearing, education is politicized.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
context, the time period, the literature
Yes.
itself, and the coverage of history.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the fact that her talk really acknowledges this, because that's very much absent in today's dialogue when you're talking to other educators. So I just wanted to say that. So thank you. So please go continue.
Yeah. So the next point that I wanted to bring up was, when we talk about what's the current state of education and the current state of our youth, the question that I just want that she's acknowledging is basically, who is failing who in the education system today. So
talking about justice and all these things. So what do you say to those that are saying that, well, Dr. Muhammad is political?
That one. I'm sorry, 25. It goes to it. Okay, let me go right here. Here it is.
The classroom. So great points. Another issue that you've been bringing about a lot too, as somebody with a background in literacy, is that in 2022, the country stated that Black children in the 4th grade had a 17% reading proficiency rate. So, as a literacy educator, what exactly, does that mean? And how do we go, forward from 17%?
So 2 ways to look at that, right? And that's a statistic about Black 4th graders, right? And remember, Blackness is diverse. A lot of people who are biracial or bicultural, if one half of them, or even a quarter, is Black, they might click Black. If they don't speak English, but they're Afro, Latino, Latina, they might click Black. So first we have to understand Blackness is diverse.
Right.
But I looked at that percentage. Okay, 17% are proficient in reading. That means 83% are at basic proficiency or below. That means we failed 83% of our nation's children. See, back to that political people who are saying education shouldn't be political. 83% of us are failing according to this data. So how can I not start talking about justice when there is, you know, this big extreme 83%? Is this your nation? Is this your son? Is this your daughter? I would ask. So when I read a statistic like that as a literacy scholar, I am first asking, do we have 17% proficiency or have we failed 83% of children through the system? I'm going to ask about that test. Is that test accurate? Because if I told you, you know, if we think about a medical exam and your blood pressure is this, and you can first question the test. Is this true? Well, what was I doing before I took the blood pressure test? You know, are we asking how accurate is the test? How accurate are the scores? We're going to say who wrote the test. Is it a diverse group? Is it balanced? Is it equitable? We're going to ask questions like, let's look at the reading questions, the passages. We know for a long time they were asking kids in the city farm questions about being a farmer. It just like kids in New York, that question isn't going to hit them different than kids in Illinois who might live near a cornfield. So, you know, I'm also going to question the tests, and then I'm going to question the system. What has been done to lead to scores like this? I'm going to look at the curriculum that is in most of our nation's schools. See, people don't do that. They just say, oh, 17%, they need intervention, they need help, they need this. That's not where you go. You go to the why. You start to study what did the curriculum give them, what didn't it give them? Because the curriculum may be designed for 17% to be proficient. The system may be designed for 83% to be basic or below. So those are the kinds of questions I ask. And I then.
So with that statement, that just had my, I mean, she talks so much more about this in the book about just really understanding like who is writing the curriculum. Because if the person who we have, or schools have decided to have their curriculum written by, don't look like the students that they're serving, then again, that's politicized. If the people, she begs to ask, like, when you're looking at the curriculum, who is writing it? Did any of them, did it represent the community that the school is serving? Did it include even the children or the students, you know, that you know, a youth perspective in this curriculum? Because the absence of all of that is just what the agenda that they want to push, but it's not actually recognizing the students that it's serving. And more of the children not seeing themselves is being reflected that it's not working. If you got that percentage of people that only, what was it, 14% that are actually being served, that means that it's the box, I mean, the path in which, or the perspective that they are teaching from is getting more and more narrow. And that's not what education is supposed to be. Education is supposed to be more and more encompassing. It's supposed to include the fact that, you know, we have this many students from this background, and it's supposed to be shown in the curriculum. Now, one of the things I can say as a high school teacher, we don't necessarily subscribe to specific textbooks now. We do at the high school level have the privilege and the honor to be able to get materials from different perspectives. But one of the things that and the English teachers do have a decision on what books they are going to include, but that's just my school. But we're not even talking about at the elementary level, where a lot of that curriculum is just being pushed out by Caucasian males. No, and the curriculum writing is not necessarily written by people from all of that serves all of the representative of all the people that that particular school serves. 9 times out of 10 is coming from, and we talked about this, coming from what we said, Texas. A lot of the curriculums and textbooks are coming out of Texas. If that's where our source is, then we definitely have to do something to change it. And I would implore anyone who is thinking about going into education, get into the field of textbook writing, get into the area of curriculum writing, because that is actually where you can make a huge impact. You know, and in the classroom, the teacher can do so much, but you can do so much more if you are putting out books like Dr. Gholdy Muhammad, addressing these things and actually coming up with solutions on how it can be taught and how it can be presented for everyone without leaving out anyone. Not necessarily saying we're not going to talk about the Caucasian race, but that should not be the only race that we recognize their achievements and their accomplishments. We should be including everyone. Now, the last point I wanted to bring up was her speaking on the 5 pursuits. This is the solution portion where she talks about how we can change how curriculum is being taught to our youth to make it more inclusive. Let me get to that.
Okay.
Do as educators.
That is a great point with the flowers. So you say that we should be.
That point with the flowers. This is a good point she made about educators. I hope it shows.
He had an inquisitive nature. He had a gift of teaching.
You're talking about what is genius? What does genius look like?
Beautiful.
And
beautiful.
Job to kind of cultivate that as adults. So for those that just are not aware of that and how to do that, what advice would you give to the adults in these children's lives and how to cultivate their genius and brilliance?
Well, I think they first need to think about their own genius, and when somebody recognized and saw the brilliance in them, the gifts that they carry, I think they have to know what genius is. Genius is like the special and unique qualities you carry. It doesn't have to just be about a state test. You know, I met a child yesterday, and 4-year-old Malik, little baby, and he had a sense of wit about him, like could make you laugh and smile. 4 years old, and he had like little tricks where he held something in his hand and asked you to guess and then gave clues. I saw genius in this child. He had an inquisitive nature. He had a gift of teaching. He had a gift of wit and laughter. He had a gift of making you smile. He had a gift of joy. That's what I look at children. Those are the kind of things I look for. And people do that naturally sometimes with their own children, but they don't extend that to other people's children sometimes. And so what I mean by that is it starts with you recognizing the brilliance and the special gifts and qualities you have, because if you don't see it in yourself, you're not going to see it in a child that's not yours. And then the second thing is you have to believe. You have to believe in something you cannot fully see yet. And I give the example of it's like planting a seed. If you plant a seed, and if I give you a little brown seed, and I say, you know, Mr. G, with the right cultivation, the right sunlight, the right watering, this is going to bloom into a beautiful, colorful flower.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can't see that now. You just have to believe it.
Right.
But you have to believe, plus do the right work.
Mm.
Those are your 2 responsibilities. You have to believe and do the work. If you believe that the seeds will grow, but you don't do anything, you don't water it, you don't nurture it, it's not going to bloom. We have people like that in education. They believe, but then they don't follow it with the work. And then we have people who do the work, they teach every day, they do the strategies, but they don't believe in the beauty of that flower. That ain't going to work either with children. So you have to do both, but you would be surprised. Some people look at that little brown seed and say, I don't see it. I don't see no flowers. I don't see the petals. So how can you believe in something you can't see yet? And if you don't believe it, what kind of work are you going to do for it? If you don't really believe that flower is going to bloom, your work is going to look raggedy. I'll water it every other day. You see where I'm going with this?
Yes, ma'am. Great point.
That's what happens with our schools. So that's the kind of work we have to do as educators.
That is a great point with the flowers. So you say that we should be pursuing kind of 5 things with education: skill development, intellectual development, criticality, joy, and identity development. So what do you say to those that are, in the education system and they are dealing with test prep? I'm dealing with, state exams. My children are performing at a lower level. I have children from different backgrounds and cultures that speak different languages, and I have to differentiate and everything. And now, Dr. Muhammad is talking about bringing joy into the classroom and identity and all. Like, when do I have time to worry about these things?
I would say to that, I would first say, how long have you been doing it the way you've been doing it? And they would say, what, a year or 2?
And everything.
I'm sorry.
And now,
I'm sorry.
This thing that you never wanted to learn. Children are the same way. What's better, teaching skills in isolation or teaching skills and somehow connected to my life and the world around me? That's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking for, some kind of impossible thing. I'm only saying that contextualize the teaching of skills, because for 5 years you taught it this way and it's not working. It is unethical to keep doing the same thing. And it's not just unethical, it's boring and it's a waste of time because it hasn't worked. So I'm going to say.
So this is where she's speaking on, and that was all the clips that I had. This is where she's speaking on, if we continue to teach and just skill-based and not include the student's identity and not include the intellectual part, like why is this happening? What's the why behind it? And we're not including a criticality behind it. And as well as the joy. Now, I had an example of this. I was posing it to one of my teachers that I work with, my science teachers. We're talking about albinism. And what I was explaining to him is, wouldn't this been nice if we had talked about the albino gene, and we also talked about it somewhere in literature about melanin and the different skin colors that we all come in. And then in history, we actually talked about how, the different, because of the different races, that the influence of other races upon other races, the fact that where mixed blood came from, if we talked about that in history, if we included all of those different layers to it, how much more enriching the lesson could have been on just talking about versus just talking about the pedigree chart. Because that was the root of, we're looking at a case study and we're looking at the pedigree and how far back different generations it went. What if we included the layers that came with that in history and in English? If we included all 3 of those subject matters with that particular topic, how much more enriching that could have been versus just talking about information. And as I spoke to one teacher, instead of the sound bites that we teach the children by, it's like we give them this bit of information, tell them to retain it, and hope that it clicks when it's time for them to sit down at the PSAT or the ACT test. But so much more could be gained from it if we actually included all these other layers to it. But we don't. We've gotten it down to the nuts and the bolts, and then we expect students to be able to, perform when it's the time for the test, and make sense of all of this stuff that all these little tidbits of information we've given you. Make sense of it on the PSA, on the ACT, because that's what all that matters, that you got the skill set. Not that it actually made sense to you, and you know the storyline, and you've made a connection with it. So those I highly encourage any educator, particularly if you are teaching at the lower level, to get a hold of this particular book and take it into account when you are writing your curriculum, when you are allowed to choose different books and different topics to cover that you include, because that's one of the things we ask. When you're looking at the curriculum, can you see a point in there where you can have identity and recognize the children in front of you that you serve it? Can you see a point where the intellectual piece has to do with it, and the criticality and the skill building and the joy of why is this a good thing to know? I make it that it's science when I'm talking about like we were talking about genetics, just talking about family, and letting them see, like I just told the students, just what we're talking about is genetics. We're talking about how you get your eye, your eye color and your cheekbones or any of these things, just to try to let them see why this matters to them, or why it should matter to them, why it should be of interest to them. And maybe you want to find out, well, why do I have this particular trait going on with me? And how far back does it go? Trying to include them with my limited amount of understanding of this, because I definitely need more understanding on how to incorporate all these 5 pursuits and materials. But I'm anxious and I'm excited to know more about how to teach it and how to change it up. So I can open to questions.
Thank you. We actually have just a comment in the chat. The miseducation of our children is by design to disempower them. And, I totally agree with that. I think that, and I do want you to open the floor up. So I'll leave it at that. Please go ahead. Let's open the floor for comments and questions.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your presentations. This I am absolutely. I'm a fan of this woman, Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. I did also. I read her book, Cultivating Genius, and I'm a reading teacher or intervention. So I pull students out of the classroom who have struggles with reading. And I work with in the elementary school setting, so mostly with kindergartners, second graders, third graders, fourth graders, not first grade, just because we have different programs for first graders. But just adding a couple of components to my lessons has just made a tremendous difference in just lifting like the level of just adding like that criticality component, because you can do it even with with little kindergartners and second graders. Adding that identity piece, you're able to connect with them in a way and just make what you're reading, the content, more meaningful, make it apply to their lives and help them understand like the reading is not just about reading this book, but it's a tool for them as a learner, as a individual, as a human person. So I absolutely just adding that, as I said, to the curriculum and what I'm already doing has been fantastic. I think that elementary school teachers in particular, but most teachers do an excellent job of teaching the skills. We have that component down. Lower grade teachers are awesome. Joy, everything's about trying to make sure the kids are enjoying themselves. Most of the teachers, that's the focus. But that identity piece, they do try to connect with the kids, but that focus on, for us in particular, I think that identity is so important because we get told who we are, through the media. We get told, kids who are watching TikTok and this and that, about what we can and cannot do, who we can and cannot be in the world. And I think that's so important that as teachers, we incorporate that into our lessons just to help them build, their understanding of who we really are and not just who the world says we are. So thank you for sharing this. I think this is something everybody needs to hear.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for your comments. Any other comments or questions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Appreciate too this presentation both last week and this week, and the sister Muhammad. I can see in her insights many of the ideas and concepts that Imam Wardi Muhammad had given to us. And even in this community of African Americans through the Nation of Islam, we talked about the joy of education. And this community, that was one of the main aspects or features of this community. This community loved the knowledge that we were receiving. It was exciting us to want to know more. And I think the Quran in Al-Islam, it instructs man that he is the Khalifa. Allah had made him in a Khalifa in the earth. And he has a responsibility or trust that he's given. When man has that kind of idea and concept about himself, and Allah tells us that everything in nature and everything is a science, so all of these things are educating us. And I think as Sister Rasheedah was saying, you know, those connections that we give to students and the universal knowledge, not just about one human being, not just one aspect. I know she said she teaches in science and she was in history, but all these things are interconnecting. And when we have a system like that teaches that, and Imam Wardi Muhammad pointed out, there's many in this world that know that, but they keep this knowledge for us. I think our responsibility is that we have come into this knowledge, and we have to make that concerted effort to bring this kind of educational system and institution into the world today. It's our responsibility, and the Imam had told us that he thought that we should build schools before we build masjids. We could have a masala in the school. So education is very important to us, and we've learned the essence of it. I'd like to recommend a book too by Imam Wardi Muhammad. It was written by Imam Ronald Shaheed. Education is a sacred matter. And I think all of our educators should look at this book. It is very insightful also. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brother Bashir. There is a question in the chat. Where can we purchase Dr. Muhammad's book?
I know that it's available on Amazon. And
Okay.
And I actually my principal actually bought a set for all the teachers that were interested in presenting this to the faculty. So inshallah, next year the work that I've done right now will inshallah come across to my coworkers next year and hopefully inspire them to actually look for curriculum that allows the students to have identity and intellectualism and criticality and joy in it. But yes, it's definitely available. It's through Scholastic Books, and it's also, I know you can purchase it on Amazon.
Okay. I have a couple quick questions. One is, can you just review those 5 pursuits quickly?
Yes. One moment. The first one is, I'm sorry.
Skill development, I think.
The first one is identity. And that is, I'm sorry. Give me one moment to find it in the text.
Okay.
Identity is, so I can give you, it might be easier for me to give it to you in an example. So for example, if you were speaking about, say, Columbus Day, right? Because it's part of the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
One of the examples that she gives is if you're talking about identity, then that would mean the students will learn about the cultural genius of indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
So starting from there. And in skills, the students would identify, analyze, and critique Columbus Day. So that's how you get that skill piece.
Mm-hmm.
The intellectual piece would be the students will learn about Indigenous Peoples Day and its history.
Mm.
See how you the different layers, and the
Yeah.
criticality portion of that would be students will learn about the importance of naming holidays that reflect truth, anti-oppression, and diversity. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the criticality piece. So not just looking at Columbus came and, quote unquote, discovered America, but all of these other different layers that you can have just speaking about that one holiday. And then the
So
joy,
that in itself is a paper,
exactly. And then the joy, students will learn ways we can celebrate the beauty of Indigenous people and Indigenous People Day. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of it just being about this one man, we can have all these other layers that are a part of it. And that way,
Globalize.
yes, and then that way each year that it comes about, the student learns more and more about themselves, and they learn more and more about what is this holiday is really about. And it's not
Beautiful.
about glorifying this one person. But that's
Beautiful.
an example that she gives in the book just with that particular holiday. So that's kind of what all of the different pursuits are, the different levels that she's speaking about
Sure.
addressing and about
That's
one topic.
beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay. There is a question. Can you just put the book up, the cover
Oh,
again, so we
yeah,
get the
yeah,
full name?
yeah.
Okay. Unearthing Joy. And the forward is by Pharrell Williams
Yes.
and Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. Beautiful.
Yes. And this is
So,
it says it's a guide to culturally and historically responsive teaching and learning.
okay, a guide to culturally and historically responsive teaching and learning. Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So with just a minute or so to go, my question is, and you don't have to answer this, but it's really just a question to everyone for us to consider, that with the progression of AI, how might AI influence education and curriculum as a whole?
Wow. Well,
Yeah,
ideally, if we actually pose the different types of questions that we're asking, it could generate something other than what has already been regurgitated over and over again every year, like the same
sure,
or the same worksheet.
sure.
IA would allow you to actually think bigger and think more less narrow-minded. That would be the goal. You would hope that the
You would
goal
hope.
you would hope.
You would hope. Okay, there's another comment in the chat. Uh, let me see. Does anyone know the name of the other book author? Name education is a critical matter. I'm not certain. I'm not sure about that. Would you like to come on screen quickly, or just give your voice to ask that question so I can better understand it? Let's see. Okay, maybe not. But yeah, I'm not sure of the question. Um, are there any other questions before we close out? I don't want to leave that person's question out, but I'm not sure of the question or how to respond to it. Okay. Any other questions out there? Well, Sister Rasheedah, I tell you, I am very, very, very invigorated by this. I love her perspective. I love her approach, and this was well worth um, bringing to the group. Right, this was well worth because I think that we all have to look at education differently. It's especially now,
Yeah.
especially now, okay, when education and curriculum, are truly being hijacked.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yes, yes,
Sister Gloria,
yes.
or something. The chat, the person may have been asking about the book that I mentioned. It was
Oh, okay.
Education, a Sacred Matter, commentary by Imam Mordi Muhammad, edited by Ronald Shaheed. That may be the book that they were referring to.
Okay, all right, thank you. Can you just repeat that one more time to make sure that they got it?
The name of the book is Education, A Sacred Matter, commentary of Imam Wardi Muhammad, edited by Ronald Shaheed.
All right, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you've gotten some nice accolades in the chat. Thank you for this excellent presentation. And we really appreciate you today. Thank you so much, Sister Rasheedah Fitzpatrick. And I want to just encourage the listeners to feel free to subscribe to Masjid Al-Taqwa's YouTube channel, and feel free to join us for our weekly Jumas, as well as to continue to tune in to our TaLeems. Thank you so very much, everyone. So if there are no further questions, we will.
Kia has her hand up.
I'm sorry, I missed
You
something.
have a hand up, Kia.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead. I missed the hand. I'm sorry. Can you please go ahead? You can feel free to ask your question.
That's all, Lincoln. I couldn't figure out how to get off mute. Can you
Oh.
put the book up once more? I want to get a screenshot. I missed it.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you for that presentation.
It was great. It was great.
All praise to the Lord.
Yes.
Did you put it up?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry, you didn't see it?
Oh.
No, you don't see it.
Oh,
Wait,
okay.
wait.
Your screen, my mistake.
Yeah. Unearthing.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you lift it a little bit so I can see the? There we go. I just want to get a full screenshot. Something is happening here.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. All right. Thank you all so very much. We will close with dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. May Allah continue to bless us all to further our education, and not just the study of Al-Islam, but the study of our expansive humanity. May Allah continue to bless us and keep us all. Ameen, ameen, ameen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very good.
Yes, it was excellent.